I think it's interesting that quite a few European intellectual commentators have, let's say, mixed feelings about the position you've taken on Islam. They aren't defending, obviously they aren't defending radical Islam, but the point they've made is that there are many different Islams, and there is hope of a modernized, reformed Islam that is compatible with Western democracy. And you've taken a very strong and a very moving, in other words, a very effective position against that view. I mean, you're arguing that, I think, that Islam is not reformable. What do you make of that criticism? And
I'm not saying Islam is not reformable. I'm just saying Islam has incredible obstacles that make it very difficult for it to be reformed. Islam as a set of ideas, but you have Muslims. I don't know, someone today mentioned to me, is it possible to have CE Muslims, Christian, so it was Christmas, Easter Muslims. And I thought, you know what?
For a moment I thought you meant Church of England Muslims. That would be even harder to imagine.
And my answer immediately was, of course, that is possible. Not only that, there are a lot of Christmas Easter Muslims. I just met one, Hanan, and Reza Aslan. And there are lots of Muslims who can somehow find a balance between living in civil society, partaking of modernity, really becoming successful, contributing to it, and then somehow finding spirituality and meaning within Islam. But reality dictates that that's not the majority. Most Muslim countries are dictatorships. There's no democracy. Most Muslim people, the 1.5 or 1.2 billion people that everyone is talking about, most of them are either illiterate or find themselves in very difficult circumstances where if they are not in economic problems, then they have freedom problems. Given that reality, I would say we have to separate two things. One is the intellectual rigor of finding the truth. It's something that people like Sam Harris simply do and say, what does the Quran say? And it's the same sort of critical analysis that was applied to the Bible, to the Talmud, to all religious books, but also to all other ideologies such as communism and Nazism and so on. If you apply that rigor, you'll arrive only at one conclusion. And by the way, you can have a more honest, more thrilling discussion with the people who truly believe in that. The other one is the strategic political approach, which is if we tell the truth too loudly, we may offend our political allies. We may offend people whom we have labeled moderate. We don't even know if they consider themselves moderate or not, who may become our allies. So let's just say Islam is peace. And you see this strategy being repeated every few months or every few years. Gordon Brown said, we're not going to say anything about, there are no Muslim terrorists. There's no relationship between Islam and terrorism. President of the United States, Islam is peace and Islam is great. That's the political, but that's not intellectual. That's not philosophy. That's not truth-telling. And by the way, it's a philosophy that backfires.
Right. Do you see a difference in attitudes on this issue in America as compared with Europe? Are you conscious of a difference?
Yes, but then I think with a cautious remark that I've been exposed to a very little bit of America, a very elite bit of America. I didn't come like the usual immigrant, so I don't know what goes on at birthday parties in this country, but I know what goes on in birthday parties in Holland. So having said that, the public discourse seems to be more honest, more confrontational than in Europe, and not all of Europe, but mostly continental Europe and the UK, where Europe is struggling with a minority of immigrants whose numbers are increasing. Europe is struggling with the past of the Second World War. They're increasing with what happened at the Balkans. They're increasing with being former colonizers, a history that America doesn't share. The European Union and trying to make that into a success So there are all these other issues going on the background. America doesn't have all of this. America has natural borders. America has one immigration policy. There's one INS. If you look at the EU members, the 25 nations, each country has its own immigration policy, its own border policy, its own visa policy, its own, and it goes on and on. People speak different languages. So there are all these difficulties that are facing Europe that are not facing the United States. And I notice these things.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let me just, I want to read a quotation, and that will maybe give you a sense from your book, The Caged Virgin, that will give you a sense of why I asked the question and why I'm going to put it to you in a slightly different way now in a minute. You write here, I think I am an atheist at heart. It just took me a while to find my convictions confirmed in print somewhere. This may sound arrogant, but I think that most people who call themselves religious are essentially atheists. They avoid thinking about whether they really believe in God. When I read that, I thought that is an extremely European sentiment. Sam Harris would not have had a success with a book called Letter to a Christian Nation in Britain, because Britain no longer is a Christian nation. And Europe is very secular, as you know, on the whole, very secular. America is a religious country. And as I'm sure you're aware, a big issue here is the interface between religion and politics. Many Americans resent the role that Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity, is exercising on the way the country is run. So there's a paradox here, it seems to me, that if you feel more at home in the US than you did in Europe, that's a little odd, isn't it, given that Europe is secular and the US is not. The US is a religious country.
But I feel very much at home in Europe. I mean, like, my home was in Holland for the past 14 years. It's a Protestant nation. It's a nation where I wouldn't really say it's not a Christian nation. The Christians I know call themselves atheists, but they also respect religion. They'll go to, like, one of my very good friends had her child baptized, and she invited me to the baptism. And we had a dance, we drank some wine, and the priest said he made lots of wishes that were all beautiful for the baby girl. I want you to live in freedom, and I want you to this, and I want you to be very happy, and so on and so forth. And I was like, I told my friend, Anayat, you are not a Christian, you're an atheist. The priest, you could have wished all this in your garden, which is much more lovely. And we didn't have to go to all of this. But then the couple said, but there is tradition. We did this because we believe in this tradition. And people marry in churches and that sort of thing, but we don't believe in Christianity. So in terms of being consistent with my faith in saying, okay, I can be an atheist,
I understand.
I'm more comfortable in Europe. With America, it depends on who you're talking to. I've met people who are virulently atheist, and I've met people who want to convert me to Christianity.
There's no middle way in this country.
I don't know. So I've met, and I've also, that's why I'm being very careful. I haven't been here long enough to give a well thought through opinion on this is the average American.
Right.
And every prejudice I had when I came here has been thwarted. People are not fat, they're not carrying guns, they're not invading anyone, they're the most tortured people in the world about foreign policy. I mean, one thing that divides this country is what is going to be our foreign policy. And living comfortably outside of America, you would think that all Americans want to invade other countries. They're all arrogant. They don't want to listen to anybody. They just go line dancing, beer drinking, burger eating, and that was the prejudice.
I've heard some of that does go on.
And that's not, and I haven't seen, so I can't, to be quite honest, I should be careful to say I don't know what to think.